So basically, what I was thinking of was, oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this. But who's done this? Well, that would be Mr. Roswell's Neighborhood, and he's going to tell me about the album Human Resources, which has just slapped me in the face. And I have nothing else to say. Dentro video.
Alan, nice to meet you. Welcome.
Hey, nice to meet you as well. Thank you.
How's it going?
It's going well, thank you.
Cool. I did before talking to you, I tried to check you out a bit on the internet, do a bit of research, and so you're from Baltimore, correct?
Yeah, Baltimore, Maryland.
And are you there right now?
Yep, yeah, I live in Baltimore, Maryland.
Mm-hmm. And how has, you know, living there and growing up there shaped your music tastes and approach to making music?
I mean, because I didn't technically grow up here. I've lived in Baltimore the longest I've lived anywhere else, which is like now like over like 10 years. And I don't know. I mean, in a lot of ways, Baltimore is probably like one of like the more like interesting and like diverse places I've ever lived. And I don't know. I've kind of had like the most experiences here, I think. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Just I think a lot of the culture here. Um, it's Baltimore has kind of like a weird like sort of art culture. It's kind of like and it's not like sort of art culture you would normally associate with like um I don't know, like a big like art scene like New York or something. It's kind of like people like do what they want and kind of like hope for the best, sort of almost. So I don't know. Yeah, there's like a lot of crazy stuff here in Baltimore. But, so I don't know. I don't really know like how it's influenced me. Like I mean, because I don't know. I don't. Yeah, like I mean, I think I was pretty fully formed when I moved here. Like I'm sure like the culture did influence my music in some way, but I don't know necessarily that I figured that part out yet.
Okay, cool. I mean, it's interesting that you say that there's not really a specific scene like in New York or like a place that is famous for having a particular style or type of people. Do you think that might have, because your music is pretty, I'd say it's pretty unique, and you yourself describe it in like on Spotify or in your bio as it like pulling from lots of different places. And so would you say like you have that kind of freedom and you do what you want because you're in a place that doesn't really put you in a box?
Well, I mean, yeah. So I think any kind of artistic expression, it's I don't know, any kind of artistic express. I was thinking about this a lot lately, but a lot of artistic expression is kind of like magic, like, and that like, I don't know if you've ever seen Peter Pan, where it's like the clapping, like when you stop clapping, like the magic stops and stuff. So it's like art is kind of like that. When the people stop clapping, like that's when the sort of magic stops happening. And it is also magic, like in a lot of ways, like people who maybe don't know how to play music or just don't make art necessarily as much. I mean, sometimes they do see people do that, and they're like, "Wow, like how can you do that?" and stuff. I think we're starting to kind of lose more of that with AI, because it's like you can kind of. I mean, the AI music has been pretty bad. I don't know, like
Pretty
um,
bonkers.
I mean, I just don't really. Yeah, doesn't sound good. Like I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very uh I don't know. It seems, I was gonna say pointless. I think further than memes and just funny stuff like, oh look, imagine Frank Sinatra sung this popular modern rap song. Other than stuff for laughs, it's thinking about the implications is pretty scary. How, and writers in for movies and series and stuff. Mm, do you think it's do you think we should be like more, maybe even more scared or aware uh, than we already are now?
I mean, you can be as scared as or aware as you want. I mean, that's kind of up to you. Uh, I don't know. Like, I mean, I've kind of gone back and forth on like the whole like robot uprising sort of thing. Like, but um, I honestly don't think that technology is the problem. I think it's kind of like the way it's used and the way essentially the way people are. So it's the people who make the technology and the people who are using it that are essentially the problems, right? Um, like for example, like instead of paying individuals more, they try to circumvent that by introducing a machine that can do it for less money or can do it, for free and can do it faster. So it's like that was one solution to the problem, but there are other things you could have done, sort of, to do that. You didn't have to go right to that machine. That was just sort of like the easiest and most convenient response that you had at the time. Um, so like I don't know. I think for artists it's a little bit different. And I know some artists are kind of like split on how they feel about AI. I mean, I've used AI a little bit for like just some like touch ups with like some artwork and stuff. I don't use it for any of my music. Just I have like tried making beats with AI, just experimenting around and stuff. But again, it just doesn't really sound like you can make a beat that sounds so much better in less time. At least in my opinion, you can. I mean, if you haven't been making music for a while, it might be different. Like that might be sort of like your outlet. So in that way, I think it is kind of a good thing because it is going to allow more people to express themselves. But at the same time, it's going to sort of water everything down to the sense where like a lot of AI stuff is essentially like the same. It's homogenous. Like if you like it all runs on like a prompt, so you end up getting a lot of things that look similar.
Um, I think that AI right now, the best use for it is, like you said, touching stuff up or things that are mechanized or automation. Like for example, when you have to, I myself have to make clips, right, for reels, or as does anyone, and it's a real, not, I wouldn't say lifesaver, but it saves so much time being able to just automate subtitles and captions and then just edit, go over that and edit it, and that kind of mechanized stuff. But then, as you said, beyond that, right now, I think, did you ever have like a Sony Ericsson phone back in the day?
I don't know what kind of phone was that. I didn't get my first phone until I was 18. I don't. Was that like a flip phone or?
It wasn't. I mean, depending on what kind of phone it was, there was like it wasn't an app, because I don't know if apps, the concept existed yet, but there was this program, this thing you could play around with, which was like music DJ, and there were some pre-programmed, pre-rendered music loops, and it had like intro, verse, chorus, outro, whatever, bridge, and then it had like different instruments and different genres, and you could just copy and paste. And I played around with that a lot, and with the video editor as well. I did it my first videos on my dad's brick phone, when the camera was like 2 megapixels. And for me, the AI stuff, especially with the making music and making beats and telling, you tell it to make a country type song with these kind of lyrics. And right now, at least as it is right now, it seems to me like that old Sony Ericsson music DJ app, instead of,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of AI is driven more by industry than it is by art, and I mean, they're two different things. They're two different things that are sort of diametrically opposed to each other, but they're also very much in like um, like they very much work in sync with each other, but they also work in disharmony, sort of. So I don't know, it's kind of weird like that. No, I don't. Sorry, I forgot what I was trying to say.
No
Uh,
worries. I mean, I wasn't expecting to go straight into AI in the first 10
oh,
minutes.
okay.
So
All right.
this is, so no pressure, this is, I mean, it's a really interesting topic, but I think we could have like a whole hour conversation about just this alone. So let's get into your art and the album and everything. So I'm pretty sure you must have been asked this all the time, but what is the origin of the name Mr. Roswell's Neighborhood?
I mean, the name was kind of like trial and error. I mean, I don't know like what had prompted it really, but I've been making music for a while, and like I had used like a bunch of weird names. Like I think like if like we're going back to like when I was very first like making music in like high school, like I think my name was like Gravity Angel or something. And like no one knew what my music was, so it was kind of like I was the only one who knew the name. But um, and I don't know, like at some point I was like just thinking about like weird different ideas, and like I like to play on words. Like I like a lot of like wordplay kind of stuff that like I don't know, it's just things that kind of sound interesting, I guess. And like I sort of wanted the music to have a positive message in some way. Like I think I wanted it to be like distortion on the sort of positive side of the scale, if that makes sense. Um, so, and I mean, I don't really know what brought up Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood specifically, but like I was just like sort of thinking of like different names like on my way home from work one day, and like I think my younger brother actually helped me out with the name. We were like in the basement later that night, and I was just like spitting out like names and stuff. And I was like, okay, what about Mr. Roswell's Neighborhood? And he was like, oh, like like it was like it clicked, and I was like, shit, that's the one. Okay.
It's really curious. It's you've got the imagery of like Roswell and aliens and stuff in your friendly neighborhood, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, fused. So it's definitely eye catching for sure.
Yeah, and I think just the name it kind of creates like a lot of imagery for the person, and I mean not I I'm kind of interested like how many people actually haven't seen like the kids show, and also Roswell isn't specifically like about an alien. It's a place in New Mexico where like they saw an alien kind of. So it's like there are these things that kind of mean different things, but people associate them differently and sort of make up their own like narratives. But yeah, I mean, I think there's like a lot of rich imagery to Mr. Roswell's Neighborhood, and I think that's kind of been my objective with it is to sort of integrate art into music and sort of keep art in music as much as possible.
hmm what you just said about creating imagery in other people's minds, we're going to circle back to that. So it's interesting that it comes up now, even with the name as well. So the album, Human Resources, on the 12 Min Albums label. I also love the name of the album and the album cover. I know you paint. Did you make the album cover?
Yes, yeah, I do all the artwork.
hmm That's sweet. So, how would you describe the genre of music that at least this specific album pertains to? If you were to describe it to a just like a casual listener of music, how would you describe it?
It depends. Yeah, it's about context. So if I get the sense the person maybe doesn't listen to a lot of music, I'll say EDM. That's usually my first response because EDM is the most widely recognized. These songs, and specifically, I found them to be a little more like alternative sounding. Like I don't know if I had set out to do that like initially, but I think that's how a lot of my music ends up coming out. It comes out in sort of like more of like an alternative like poppy style, but or it, at least structurally, it's very much the same as like a lot of like pop music or yeah, like a lot of mainstream contemporary music. But most of the sounds are not really even things you would hear, and like they're heavy, like really like aggressive sounds, but like they're not things you would necessarily like hear even in like a Nine Inch Nails or like a Skinny Puppy song. So that's kind of my objective is to make art like magic, sort of to like make that through music, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so that's pretty funny. Like EDM, something like EDM, which is in the mainstream and everybody, at least here in Madrid, if you go to certain discos, that's what you're gonna get. But then, as you said, like the specific sounds that you use in the songs, personally, like well, it's pretty upbeat and it's also something to get you pumped. What comes to my mind when I listen, like from like this after the intro from the first like proper track on it, I mean song, um, imagery of the Matrix comes up in my mind, which is my favorite movie. So that's awesome. Also, like something you would hear on GTA radio on Grand Theft Auto, specifically like the second game. The game, the first couple games were like top down, and it's before they were licensing songs. They kind of made their own soundtracks, and it was pretty freaky. And so that's what came up, in my mind at least. Mixed with, like you said, Skinny Puppy and even mindless self-indulgence. What would you say attracts you to this kind of sound?
I mean, it's a lot of things. I mean, initially the idea is, I think, what attracted it to me, and I think that's kind of what also has kept me attracted to it, is essentially that electronic music it's a way to make music that like a human otherwise possibly can't make. Like it would possibly be like it would be technically impossible for like a human or like a group of 10 people to like play, this like beautiful like piece of like instrumentation or music. So I don't know, my thought was like, instead of that, instead of like a pit orchestra or something, or instead of having a full group of musicians, like trained musicians playing this one piece, you could have like sort of like you could sort of like use the machine sort of to like again, it's like distortion on that positive side of the scale. It's trying to sort of use the machine to sort of build something to be like a progressive force in nature, rather than something that is like, I don't know, replacing individuals.
Hmm. Um, so, for example, the track Lilith Detached, which is the fourth one, that one specifically reminds me of like a night in a dystopian, like cyberpunk kind of city or context. Like do you know the movie Strange Days
No, it sounds familiar, but no.
by Catherine Bigelow? It's I think it's early '90s movie, and that stayed with me because I caught my dad watching it one night when I was still a kid, and I wasn't supposed to be up, and then as an adult, I later watched it, and it's just I recommend it to anyone. It's really good. But like speaking of movies and video games, do other mediums influence your music in this way?
I mean, like other music definitely influences me. I mean, I am sort of influenced by video games in a weird way. Like not necessarily. It's probably not in the way like a lot of people would expect, like, oh, video game music, like most, like I don't really listen to like a lot of chip tune or like, bit based like stuff like that. But I don't know, like just like playing video games and sort of growing up as part of that culture and growing up with video games, I think that has actually like inspired me a lot. And it does kind of give me a lot of ideas. Like sometimes I'll just be playing something and like, I don't know, I'll get like inspired to make something. So it's not necessarily like I'm inspired by like hearing a certain melody or a beat, but I am like, it's like an intrinsic thing that I feel when I do something. So I'm like inspired to do that.
Hmm. I think that's what I was referring to, because I wasn't necessarily talking about maybe video game soundtracks specifically, just like the vibe. I mean, people throw around the word vibe a lot these days, but the vibe you get from a specific, video game or just movie, or because it happens to me all the time. You just something comes up, or you're inspired by either retroactively, or you're watching something, and then immediately your mind goes to a place, and you're like, hang on, let me record this voice note on my phone and come and go back to whatever I was doing. And what about sonic influences, like other artists? You mentioned Skinny Puppy and Nine Inch Nails. What other influences do you have?
A lot. I mean, it varies. I mean, right now in heavy rotation, I have Actors. I've been listening to Actors a lot. They're like a sort of like post-punk '80s type band. But I don't know, they have like kind of like a good, I think, palette and like a diverse set of sounds that I really like. I've also been listening to a lot of Ben Folds for some reason. I don't know why. Ben Folds 5. I think it's like I found out that his music kind of just puts you in a good mood instantly, and like you don't know why necessarily. So I kind of like that about a lot of his songs. And I don't know the sound. Like I'm influenced by just like a lot of '80s stuff, a lot of post punk, industrial stuff. So yeah, I mean, Skinny Puppy, I think is probably definitely like one of like the biggest like influences on me. And just different kind of bands like from that scene, like Ogre, Nine Inch Nails, and also some IDM bands like Download and stuff like that. Like I'm not like a huge like IDM nerd. Like I can't list you like every IDM band like that ever existed. And I'm not really a big Aphex Twin guy. But yeah, I don't. So honestly, yeah, man. It depends. It kind of depends on the day. Like it's. I mean, I kind of just stick to that adage. Like if it sounds good, it is good. And then like so like if I hear something that sounds good, like I'll add it to my library. And I'll if I feel like that fits like a certain vibe that like I'm into, I'll fit that to a playlist or something.
Hmm. I don't think it's necessary to really do anything else. Feels good, you add it, you listen to it, like especially Ben Folds, if you want to feel good, you just put him on and you feel good. I mean, I think that's the beauty of it. It's simple and magical in that sense. So going back to the album Human Resources, the full album experience definitely creates a world of its own when you listen to it. Like, and it sounds like it has its own lore. At least, I think when I put it on, there was definitely images going through my head and like a thread going through it. But do you have an actual concept for the album?
I mean, yeah. So the concept is a little bit on the nose. It's essentially like about human resources. Like, what if a human resources department was literally just that? It was like a department you went to like use like raw like humans. Like, and it's kind of grim to think about it, but also like uh, it's it's sort of related to my experience in COVID, just like working in the healthcare industry and sort of being on the front lines with that. And you do see like a lot of people sort of empower using people essentially like human resources. So they're essentially like using people like human shields to sort of, and they don't really have like an end game in mind. They kind of just keep that process going. They keep using people like that. So that's essentially what it is. It's about people using other people to kind of get what they want, for evil purposes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not what it conjured up for me specifically, but at least the environment that the mood that it kind of puts you in, that's something that is fits in with whatever came up in my mind when I listened to it. What would you say is the ideal moment to listen to the album?
I do want to go back for a second also because I don't know if you've ever seen the Twilight Zone, but
Only clips. I know it's humongously classic, but I have not actually seen any full episodes.
so in one of like the famous episodes, it's called "To Serve Man," and that's actually where some of like the lines in Lilith Detached come from, like where like the way nightmares begin. So it's like that is also kind of like just another pull into like the world of like human resources. Like I don't want to give away like the Twilight, like I don't want to spoil it, I guess, but like I don't know, it's cool, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, so now you mentioned it, I'm going to add it to my list of things I have to check out, and specifically that episode, and then put that track back on and make my own conclusions.
Yeah.
Um, so for this project, for this specific project, you had a 12-minute restriction. Had you ever done anything like that with this kind of restriction, and how did it shape the way that your creative process? How did it shape the way you approached to this album?
I mean, I've worked with like limitations, but not really like restrictions in that sense. So I'm really this is something like I'm used to working with, but also not used to. Like initially, I thought the concept of like 12 minutes was going to be like no problem, because like I'm like I don't know, like I feel like most of my tracks end up being like an average between like usually like 3 minutes. So I was like, okay, 4 tracks in like 3 minutes, like that would be good. And then like I don't know, things started to come together, and I took things apart and then put them back together again. And that's kind of like how human resources came about. Um, Sorry, what was the question again?
That was it. Like,
Uh,
so you were saying you hadn't had that kind of strict restriction before, and then,
Oh yeah.
um,
Well, I mean, initially, I think what the other person from 12 Minute Album said, that the sort of concept behind the whole like label is essentially like um he didn't say this, but I interpret it as it like attention spans are shorter basically, so people aren't really going to listen to things as long. So 12 minutes is like perfect. And I think there's a lot of sense to that, because you see people releasing singles more and more than actually devoting time to like albums and EPs. So I think people are spending less and less time listening to things. They're kind of listening to like 1 or 2 songs and then moving on to whatever. Um, and I don't know, in that sense, I have always tried to sort of condense things into sort of being like I don't know. It's weird, like sort of being like a very condensed and distorted sort of like pop song, like pop dance song, almost. Like I don't know if that makes sense. But
yeah, yeah. It I think it's inevitable to be influenced in creating whatever you do, music or if it's visual, by how we consume things today. And it is definitely true that we have shorter attention spans, myself included. And 12 minutes is a pretty ideal. It's not too long and it's not too short. You've got at least some leeway to develop, musical ideas. Um, and I know you have like albums you put out previously, and stuff, and they're like full lengths, but the tracks are 3 4 minutes, as you said. Um, Doing this and cutting it to like 12 minutes, and did you have any happy accidents where it was like you weren't intentionally going to do something, but then it just fell into place and fit?
yeah, not really. I mean, I know that it was sort of. I don't really think I had to make like any major changes to any of the tracks. I know I did have to trim some stuff out. But I know that I think they're I can't remember if I remember I wanted to do like a prologue track that was just like sort of more experimental, because that's still sort of very much something that I enjoy doing. I can't remember if I put like an epilogue sort of thing, like a final track in there or not. But I know that that was sort of part of my plan. If like it didn't, to sort of fit it into like the 12-minute thing, if like 4 tracks wouldn't work, like I would make another experimental track. And I don't know, it would sort of fit within like the storyline, but it wouldn't be like another 3-minute track necessarily. Um, yeah.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah. So, you know, finally you have that, you've got that prologue and then you've got that epilogue at the end there. That fits
Yeah, I mean,
nicely.
I don't know if it's like pretentious to think that way. That's how it makes sense to me. I don't know, like you can call it a prelude or whatever you want. Like I don't know.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say pretentious, because I think, you have a specific idea and intent for something, If you approach it, like if you have that approach, and it's not just to, I was gonna say, even if you're trying to make a statement or whatever, I still think it's pretty valid. So, personally, I think that was greatly done. Now I'd like to ask you about the more visual side of things. So, like we mentioned before, you've got some paintings. You're a painter, and I was going through some of your work on your website, which I don't know if you still update or anything, but I went through it, and I wanted to ask you if you have separate places in your brain or wherever this creative process comes from for when you're painting and for when you're making music, or if just everything comes out from the same place.
Um, it is a little bit of both. I think music and art are they're the same thing. Like I mean, because art is still can still mean music or poetry or crafts or whatever it is. So I think there is always sort of like that divide between thinking about music as music and art as just that, as something that is strictly a visual form of media. Um, and but I don't know. Also, like a lot of times, like making music has been kind of like painting. Like it's been like because that's how I approach making music. Like I have a folder on my computer that I label audio canvas, and when I feel like making something, like I get to it. I start making stuff. And honestly, like that's it. It is kind of like it's not sitting down beforehand and worrying about how creative you can be. It's just kind of putting yourself into it and trusting yourself and trusting the process and actually putting time into making something and seeing what comes out of it and then just developing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, one specific painting caught my eye. It's yellow. It's a yellow one, and I'm
Okay.
going to get into more detail in a second. But it's just so you can see like my train of thought when I came upon it. So it immediately it reminded me of a dream I had once, which is kind of recurring, but it always happens like in separate places, and it's a dream where I was going through this sort of endless maze, but it was underground and it was pretty claustrophobic. That the ceiling was quite low. Like it was sort of like a cave, but it was well lit as well, like yellow light, and it was pretty overwhelming. And it could have easily been a nightmare, but instead, I remember, during the dream, I just kind of accepted it, and I went through it like it was a section of I don't know if you're familiar with Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind specifically, but like a level with undergrounds, caves. It's mysterious. It's like, there hasn't been, light signs of life for maybe a few hundred years, and you don't know what's going to come out of the corners, right? So this painting that I'm talking about of yours specifically is actually the album cover to your proof of concept. I don't know if have you got it like in mind right now?
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
So I wanted to ask you, because I think the painting of it in itself, and you have a few that follow this style. To me, I think it can be pretty chaotic. All just that's the first word that comes to mind. But the more you look at it, it has like some sort of established. I don't know how to put it. Really, it's not just chaos. It's more like it works. It's a whole system and structure that kind of just seems like it's been there for ages. And I wanted to ask you, what kind of relationship do you have with the more chaotic side to your art? Like when it's inside you and you bring it out, and once it's out, yeah, what would you say? What would you say your relationship to that chaotic side to your art is? I don't know if you are
I, I
following.
I mean, yeah, I think I know what you're saying. For me, I think part of it is trying to sort of harness the chaos. And what you're talking about with proof of concept, I honestly think you kind of like hit the nail on the head almost. Like, there's like this underground city, and like sort of it's a lot of like, yeah, sort of my style didn't intentionally start out this way. That's just sort of how the process develops. You start making something, and then you kind of get better at it. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of the times, like when I'm painting specifically, like I have this view of like almost like like a circuit board, kind of like a circuit board that's and I don't, so it's almost like a futuristic, like dystopian city, and that's kind of like what it would look like. It'd be all like yellow and messed up and stuff. Like, um,
Yeah, yes. Circuit board is actually uh, probably the best, word maybe to give it a specific form, and doesn't necessarily have to be a circuit board, but it's like a circuit board type of map or blueprint or something. And
yeah, because it's like when you're like, if you're like ever going up in a plane and you see like those grids, they just like, so it's kind of like that, and I don't know, you sort of see the same patterns in the circuit board, and those are, I don't know. I think a lot of technology is integrated into our cities, so that makes sense how like a circuit board would sort of fix. And actually, in a city like DC, everything is kind of set up very much like in like straight lines like that. So it is kind of like this, like that. I don't know. But so anyway, so getting back to your point, it's about trying to sort of harness the chaos. So individual elements might not always make sense on their own, like using a lot of detuned instruments. I mean that's like, I don't know. I feel like that's like where a lot of like my sound comes from, is just like detuning instruments. But like if you listen to just that part, it's not going to sound. It's going to sound like a detuned instrument. It's probably going to sound like not right. But then it's like when you fit like three or four other things that are also maybe a little bit off, but they can complement this other thing. So I think it's about harnessing the chaos and trying to sort of fit all of these different parts that don't make sense into a part that does make sense and can actually um, do be something productive, that be something worthwhile. So it is kind of just making sure that all of these parts that, yeah, I mean it's essentially all the parts that don't make sense eventually make sense, I guess.
yeah, like, so taking a step back and just looking at the totality of the thing will make it make sense, something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that was eloquently put. Um, so I keep, telling you this reminds me of this, and that reminds me of that, and this evokes this in me, whatever. Um, like art is subjective, and different people obviously, always get different meanings to the same art. Like the way that I'm using, I've said chaotic and dystopian, upbeat and pumped might not necessarily be the same for someone else. Maybe do you, when you put your stuff out, your paintings and your music, do you initially hope for it to be perceived in any specific way, or do you like just leaving it up to the listener and the watcher?
I think initially I did, when I first, or not when I first started, but when I got into more of the habit of making more of my music public and shareable. I kind of quickly gave that up. I think it is something that you sort of have in your mindset, because like it feels good to be validated as an artist. So if you do make like that one song that's like fast and good, and it was like some song off proof of concept that like I've completely forgotten about since then. So like I tried to make everything like that one song. And so I've kind of given up on that idea, and usually it's like I would say it's about 50-50, where like my intention actually like lands, or like something I think is good, someone else thinks it is also good, like that. There's usually about a 50-50 chance, and then usually the stuff I throw out and think is like not very good can be like, I don't know, everyone likes it or something. I don't know. I mean, not everyone likes it, but like more people like it than I would. So yeah, I would say about 50. It's about 50-50 as far as intention goes.
Hmm. That's a fair middle ground, I'd say.
I mean, it's probably less. It's probably like, I don't know, 70-30, but it's, I don't know.
It's in maybe it's an initial hopeful 50-50, and then once it comes out and then the scales tip in one way or the other, but I think
Yeah.
it's fair to initially put it out with that mindset. Um, and speaking of artistic, sorry, visualistic, no, visual arts and paintings and um, in like for the videos or for the video to the Human Resources album, each track is like a sort of like a visualizer in the style of those Windows Media Player of old, like XP, where the track's playing and you have a trippy animation thing going on. Um, since you both make music and paint, what importance do the visuals that accompany the music have for you?
I mean, the visuals were interesting because I initially wanted to do something a little bit more ambitious for the visuals, and that I wanted to essentially um, make like a not a slideshow, but something that was, it would be like, an image every second. So it would be like stop motion or something, and be like this like nonstop like rainbow, like, sort of barcode thing. But it would be like different like shapes and patterns. So it'd be kind of like what is like behind me right now, but it would be like that, like just really, really fast. Um, and that was sort of initially what I wanted to do. And I didn't really have like the time or the resources to get all of that done. So I did ultimately just go with like sort of a visualizer aspect. And I don't know. I mean, I like the visualizer. Again, I think like I probably could have done a little bit better with like the videos personally, but I don't know. Hopefully, I'll have time to do that at some point. Yeah, and yeah, a lot of times like I have ideas as an artist, but it's just not always having the resources to put all that stuff together.
That very last sentence you said, I think, is a very valuable lesson to any artist, because you can get lost in um, infinitely delaying a deadline or not wanting to put something out because there's ambition. There's like a more ambition than there is resources and time to actually finish something. And I also relate to that quite a bit. So, maybe for this you might have wanted to do something uh, um, more trippy or more, with a bigger budget or scale, like you said. But I think, again, like you said before, middle ground. I think it's a pretty good compromise.
I remember actually before I set out to make the video, I like did research on like your guys' like I was like, oh man, I'm gonna see like what the other 12-minute like videos are, and I was like, man, these are so fucking good. Like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to, like, yeah, mine's gonna be so much worse than this. I don't know.
No, I don't think, the 12-minute. So it started at the beginning of 2022, and now we're ending 2024. So we're ending the third year. That means there's almost up to 36 of these different projects, and each with its own video. And I'm sure you've gone through. Yeah, you said you went through and saw a bunch of different examples. There's just so much variety that I think if there's a place or a home for what you do and for what you ended up doing for the videos, I think this is a perfect place, because there's more simplistic material to shot videos that look more like a movie, and anything in between. So um I think it fits perfectly in the 12-min roster. So it's already been about 45 minutes, and I have reached my final rapid fire questions of the end of the interview. Although I don't know about you, this has just flown by for me. So I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, and just don't overthink it too much. Give me whatever you feel comes out. So speaking of the 12-min album's label, Are there any artists or albums that you have gravitated towards, or liked, or have popped up and interest
Uh,
you?
Kashka, the music of Kashka's been one. I like both their artwork and their music. I think it's really good. It reminds me of a lot of Ann Albatross and some of those bands. And I forgot what the name of the artist was, but I think that was the video that really stuck out to me. It was almost like a visualizer thing, but I don't know. But I think Kashka is probably definitely like one of my favorites that I've been drawn to off of this label.
Kashka's is the artist, and the
Yeah.
album, yeah. And what's the other?
Kashka, there's Drone Honey, Bipsip Roots, Kaleidoscopic. Those are the ones that I've listened to. But yeah, for some the one with the really cool video, I don't remember the name. It was just a guy though. It was like a really corny like album cover. It was like him like, oh shit, I shouldn't say that. But yeah, it was like a I don't know, it was like him like holding an instrument or something. um,
Okay.
uh,
I'm trying to think. I'll do some research and edit it and edit the picture in.
yeah,
But yeah, no worries. It's so funny because I think Kashka's um, in these interviews, which this has only been the fourth one, but this is the fourth mention of Kashka, like 4 out of 4. Everybody mentions Kashka, so that's we should probably give them employee of the month or something. 'Cause
yeah, yeah, man.
it's so funny how just different artists gravitate towards Kashka. That's really cool. Okay. Um, you also, we talked about attention spans and listening to music and singles before. How do you personally listen to music? Do you still put on a physical medium or just stream? Do you listen to full albums or choose a playlist?
Most of the time, I prefer to listen to albums. I mean, I'm still very much like an album and sort of a story and narrative listener. But I mean, it's a different sort of listening experience to listen to one song, 5 songs, 10 songs. But I feel like finding a really good album that kind of sits with you and grows with you over time is kind of a rare thing. But to me, that's kind of what it's about. It's about sort of finding those. And I mean, you'll hear there will be like a lot of awesome music. Like I'm not saying to discard like other music that is in like singles or playlists and stuff like that. I'm just saying like I think ultimately that is kind of like the legacy of music is or at least of like popular rhythm and blues kind of this like era of modern society music is sort of like the album. Maybe I think previously it was like the symphony or the orchestra or the opera, and now it's like still that, and that's going to be sort of eventually replaced by the playlist or the single, which or maybe it already has. I don't know, but it's kind of perspective, I guess. But I mean, really, that's my preferred way of hearing music is like an an artist I like or an artist I haven't found yet, and then just finding an album that I can listen to backwards and front, and then like hit like anywhere in between, and like it's like they're like all bangers, you know. It's like,
Hmm. The the question to if the playlist has overtaken what dictates, like society's ears or whatever is, at least I know for record labels, they definitely prepare marketing and gear it towards let's get a single playlist ready. They're now they're what's the word? They're kind of their mark of success is if they have got their artists singular songs on most listened to top 50 X playlist, etc., etc. Which, yeah, I don't know. It could a bit sad, although maybe it's just how it is naturally evolving. I don't know. I'm like you. I like listening to when I discover an artist or I put like an artist on my list of things I have to check out. I obsessively go through a whole discography and then stick with whatever I like. But yeah. Okay. You mentioned video games before. Any video games you have fond memories of, and do you still play?
Yeah, I mean, I still play video games. Fond memories of, I don't know, that's I like the Deus Ex games a lot. I liked the System Shock and BioShock franchise. Like those have always been kind of like really not like sentimental, but yeah, they've always been like sort of like classics to me. Those Half Life, Fallout, like those kinds of like RPG action games. Yeah, like a lot of those have kind of been. I mean, I'm not really into. You mentioned GTA. Those were kind of like my other siblings would always play that stuff. I don't know a lot about that. The I don't know. So yeah, it really depends on I kind of play as time allows now. Like I don't really do as much as I would like to necessarily. But yeah, like I definitely have like good memories of like video games.
Hmm. If you look for like GTA 2 soundtrack or whatever on YouTube, you'll understand what I mean by why human resources and your music in general kind of evoke that. But it makes so much sense that you mentioned like Deus Ex and System Shock and Half Life because the music sounds like if you indeed have been subconsciously or even consciously inspired by video games, I'd say those are specifically the types of games that would have inspired the person who made this kind of music, so.
Yeah, I forget the name of the artist, but the person sometimes art in video games can also be really cool because like the guy who did the art for Half Life 2, I don't remember his name right now, but he did that and like Dishonored, and I think like Prey. He did like so it's like that very minimalist, like almost like sinister kind of like torture device kind of thing, but it's very like modernized almost and sort of like haunting in a way. Like that's like I don't know. I really like that style a lot.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And finally, Aaron, if you could only take 4 albums to a desert island, which would they be?
Probably The Sky's Gone Out by Bajas. It would be a toss up between White Album and The Revolver for the Beatles. Um, I would probably bring the greater. No, I would bring Back and Forth Volume 6, Skinny Puppy. Um, the fourth one, I don't know. Like the fourth one, I feel like I need to pick something classical, just like to be like a good boy or whatever. Like, but like I can't think of anything like I'd want to listen to like the rest of my fucking life.
I don't think it's a require. It's what would you be at peace with listening to among the other three that you just mentioned?
I think I would probably bring something by Pink Floyd. I would bring either The Wall. I would bring The Wall personally. Yeah, that would probably be my last choice.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, that's it from me for today. How do you feel after this job interview, music artist interview?
I don't know. I feel nervous. I,
Don't
I'm
worry.
I'm more nervous than I thought I was gonna be. I thought I was not gonna be nervous at all, but here I am.
Don't worry. I mean, this is already the fourth one that I've done, but I still feel at least a bit nervous because this I'm meeting you in this call for the first time, and me too. I also thought I'd be a lot more relaxed, but no one can see me sweating through my armpits, but it's okay. Thank you very much for talking to me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. And everybody streams the heck out of human resources. Do you have anything you want to leave our esteemed audience with?
Well, no, I just wanted to say thank you for having me, thank you for hosting this, and having this interview. I mean, I really appreciate it. This is like really cool, and it's been great talking to you. And it's yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting opportunity, and yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun doing it. So just thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you to you and everyone, hopefully, who will listen to it or not listen to it. You know, they can. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, man.